0-2 teams, this video is for you. To win in week 3, you can't wait on waivers, but the good news is there's 5 running backs that are likely available in your league right now who can actually swing matchups this week in your favor. If this is your first time here, I'm Joe. I've done over 1 billion views in fantasy sports over the last decade, but more importantly, I've helped thousands of people just like you win their fantasy league, and I plan to do the same for you in this video. But I always start with the top NFL news stories and why they matter for fantasy football. Always want to try and give you guys some value right off the bat. And then I hit 5 of the best questions from the YouTube comments on the last video. That's just a way to boost some engagement, but also reward people that are dropping smart comments on each and every video. And then finally, I dive into today's one key topic, aka the reason that you clicked. Always want to deliver on every single click. So let's jump right into today's news. The first news item that caught my eye was a little bit of quarterback watch and just watch in general in DC. Jaden Daniels truly day-to-day with that knee injury. So I think there's a little bit of doubt here for Sunday. So Marcus Mariota would definitely get the go if Daniels cannot. Dan Quinn also said that there are some return to play markers that he has to hit. He also expects Chris Rodriguez to be back in the fold with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Jerry McNichols also in the mix. But yeah, if fantasy, I guess from a fantasy perspective, if Daniels is limited or out, definitely expect fewer QB rushes across the board and definitely a committee leaning backfield that could matter for some spot starts this week. The next thing that everyone wants to hear about, everyone wants to talk about is JJ McCarthy and that high ankle sprain. We'll see if that was what was going so bad for the Vikings last week. But in general, high ankle sprain, probably 2 to 4 weeks he's going to miss. Carson Wentz is preparing to start against Cincinnati. Obviously, they just lost their quarterback in Joe Burrow. And then Minnesota heads overseas for a couple games, weeks 4 through 5. So that complicates this timeline with the ankle a little bit more also. So short term, hopefully Wentz can come in, be like a steady arm back there, help the pass catchers a little bit. We will see, but definitely wasn't a lot of good in Minnesota last week. Brian Thomas Jr., apparently he had a wrist issue going into the game this week. That wasn't on the injury report, which is kind of crazy. So Cohen hinted that like there's definitely a conversation that's going to be happening there. The tone sounded a bit ominous in general. For fantasy, I think we're just keeping an eye on practice notes here with BTJ before locking him in this week. A couple other small things that I wanted to touch on. Christian Kirk looks like he expects to be back from that hamstring injury in week 3. Houston could definitely use him. Jalen Hurts, everyone wants to talk about these design quarterback runs. It sounds like they're coming though. So we'll see if we get Hurts. I believe he's Thursday Night Football this week, but we'll see if we get some more designed quarterback runs for Jalen Hurts, more of what we saw last year. But it does seem like something that they are trying to address. Justin Fields, I feel like we've talked about him a decent amount. Obviously, he was someone that, if you've been watching my content, you probably drafted him. If not, you may have been trying to trade for him after last week. Does look like that concussion, though. We're basically looking at this practice on Wednesday to see if that, or Wednesday or Thursday, to see if he'll be able to go this week. Truly questionable. It still feels like at this point, Tyrod Taylor coming in. Definitely serviceable if you're in a pinch at quarterback, but ideally we would love to get Justin Fields back, obviously. Brock Bowers, the thing we were kind of looking at last week was this knee injury. Caught 5 of 8 passes yesterday against the Raiders, only 38 yards. Definitely disappointing. We'll see if the knee injury is still bugging him a little bit. Some of it could probably be blamed on Geno, of course, but this is another one of those ones from a fantasy perspective that we'll have to keep a very close eye on. All right, let's jump into a few questions. Only a couple that I wanted to make sure that we touched on so far. In this one in particular, should I do AJ Brown for RJ Harvey? I don't have another running back except Johnson from the Steelers. Yeah, I would say, man, a lot of people thinking about trading AJ Brown. I'm not in that camp for right now. I think that he's always going to be kind of like a high efficiency guy if there's not going to be a lot of passing volume in that offense. But I don't think weeks 1 and 2 were representative of his like rest of season value. So while I do like RJ Harvey long term, I'm definitely not moving AJ Brown for him. Waited on tight end in my draft, grabbed Loveland, picked up Strange for week 1. Is Colston Loveland worth the wait? I have Juwan Johnson and Hunter Henry on waivers. Yeah, I mean, Juwan Johnson has been pretty impressive so far. Seems like in general, these guys are kind of all in the same tier for me. And I think there's probably better days ahead for Strange as well as Hunter Henry. So I think Colston Loveland is worth the wait. Personally, I think that the talent is there. Obviously, the offense needs to be a lot better. So I'm not making a huge move there, I don't think. Was there anyone else that I wanted to touch on here? Tell me if I made a good trade. Traded Javonte Williams for Devonta Smith and Taylor. Javonte Williams for Devonta Smith and Jonathan Taylor in a 12. Yeah, I mean, I think you killed that. Obviously, Javonte Williams has been great. I think he's got 3 touchdowns so far. Obviously, that offense being good helps him quite a bit. Yeah, Devonta Smith and Taylor, I think, is a home run if you're on that side of that deal. Would be a great addition if you feel, yeah. Oh, so I mentioned on yesterday's video, I'm debating doing a live stream after my DraftKings live stream. So every Sunday morning, I go position by position, build a DraftKings lineup live on stream at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Thinking about adding another live stream to just go through and answer all of your guys' start sit questions, because I try and avoid the start sits in these videos because it's not usually as useful for everyone. But if we did a live stream on Sunday, a second one, still want to know if you guys would be interested in seeing that. So drop a comment below if you would love to do some last minute questions live with us on Sunday morning. Would probably be around 10 a.m. Eastern time, roughly. So let me know. Not sure about the D-Hop role once Likely gets backed. Yeah, I just want to flag this quickly. I didn't mention that yesterday when I was talking about D-Hop. I think that the role has been pretty strong, but this is a fair point. Just in general, that when Love Likely comes back, he's still going to capture some of that target share. He's someone that has definitely earned Lamar's trust and has definitely been really good at times for the Ravens. So yeah, anytime a low pass volume offense does end up getting someone back, yeah, it hurts someone like D-Hop, who's a little bit of like a fringe character for them currently. So I think that's totally fair. Should I prioritize Danny Dimes and Goff this week or wide receiver 3 options like Franklin? Yeah, so I think in general, the question is, should I be prioritizing quarterbacks on the waiver wire versus adding to my depth at wide receiver and running back? I would say unless you're just carrying one quarterback, you obviously need to grab a guy for this week. That's totally different. I'm almost always going to try and improve my depth at wide receiver and running back whenever possible on the waiver wire. And I'm not just trying to grab a good option for a second QB. I'm not saying that's what this person's asking, but wanted it to be something that I addressed, that the waiver wire is to be improving your team all year round, but then also capture a little bit of upside for down the road in your season, in my opinion. All right, let's jump into today's one key topic: 5 must-add running backs to pick up in fantasy football. So we're talking through some waiver wire ads for the running back position, but let's get the whiteboard out for this one. Per usual, I got 5 for you today. Let's jump in. The first one, there's definitely probably no surprise here because he's on the thumbnail. Let's talk about Tutin for a second. So Tutin is someone that I hope a lot of you guys have just from drafting him, right? Well, let's talk through why I think that. Obviously, they trade Tanks Bigsby, all of that stuff. But let's get into this. So the trade, I think, is number 1. So he's basically the runaway number 2 now, behind ETN. So this trade, I think, is a huge signal for us that they want to use him in general, and that Tutin is going to have a real role as like that primary change of pace guy behind ETN. In that first game, he was the clear number 2, finishing with only 6 fewer carries than ETN. Obviously, he has that big juke for a touchdown in the passing game. So we like to see that. And the Jags are going to continue to play up in pace. More snaps equals more running back touches to distribute between Tutin and ETN. So really like that. I would say that the usage spike is in general stands out. So the usage spike, and I think just that he has a real role. Because it was a little bit of a cluster at times, obviously, in the offseason leading up to this with Tank Bigsby there, that 3-man rotation, that ambiguous backfield, something that we like because we think there's upside if things break right. But now we just have a pretty clear path here. So the projections have basically ETN kind of neck and neck in terms of his total carries by the end of the year. So I like to see that there's going to be some volume, but also the efficiency. The offensive line is definitely the biggest liability that I see here. So I'm going to put that here as one of the liabilities. But if Tutin's going to be used in the receiving game, sometimes that can be a little bit of a plus. There's more pressure, ends up with the more dump offs, all of that. So I think the question is he really a must add? And he's in 40% of teams already, so he's definitely not available in every league. But I would say he is a must-add for this type of backfield that definitely doesn't have like a runaway number 1. I think that there's still opportunity here for this to be a true 1A, 1B situation. Cohen's kind of shifted committees to a feature back before. Obviously, we saw that with Bucky Irving. So I think this is a really solid stash if this upside ends up consolidating a little bit. Number two, someone that we could probably talk about at length, but we're going to make this one quick. Tyler Allgeier. We just saw the Falcons run all over the Vikings in week 1, but Tyler Allgeier in particular on the waiver wire, what do we think? So to me, this is a fast run first team. As of now, right? 4th in neutral pace, 7th in plays per game, but they've been run leaning so far this year, and last year they were definitely run heavy. So more total plays. I would say that just more total rushing plays in general. The non-Bijan carries start to add up a little bit to me. So the thing that we have to think about though is that this is pretty game script driven. I mean, last week, the second half carries were huge for him, obviously. And I think why it matters is we could be playing him when they control games. So if the games are going to be close, we probably see a little bit more Bijan. But obviously, with them running away with things in Minnesota, they ended up using a lot more Bijan than I think most people expected, myself included. So I think that there's contingency volume here. And then plus huge standalone value. So with these type of situations, we need standalone value for it to even make sense. If Bijan goes down, he could end up being like a league winner. So I think he's more than a handcuff. Personally. So he would be a priority for me. Only 34% of teams have actually rostered him. Number 3, Brian Robinson Jr., now a 49er. So actually kind of some similar situations here. Obviously, there's been some injuries for the 49ers, all of those things. But if he's going to continue to be like the shadow back for CMC, I think there's going to be, there's going to be use for him in general. So he only got 7 touches in week 2. So I think the usage, again, is pretty game script dependent. Say CMC number 2, obviously. Anytime you can be the handcuff for a situation like that, it makes sense. But one of the things that I don't think is talked about enough is the schedule, which could be a legit cheat code. Legit cheat code. Let's zoom out a little bit so you guys can actually see it. So in general, this is one of the easiest schedules in the league. I have it as the 4th easiest rushing schedule. So in general, if CMC misses any sort of time, this is the exact type of situation where things start to condense a little bit, but the upside is really high if there is an injury. So really just one tweak away from being a league winner. One tweak away. Number 4. Who we got? Trey Benson. So he's on 55.8% of rosters. So he might not be available in your league. But if he is, I think he's worth scooping up. So 50% of leagues. But I think if he is available, I mean, he's the clear backup behind Connor, who's obviously 30-year-old workhorse backups. You could probably do well in fantasy just making sure that you have these things covered, right? So it's a bet against James Conner. Also, Arizona runs the ball a ton. I would say that we've seen some efficiency flashes here, though, on limited work. So they've all obviously said a few times already that they could have 2 number 1 backs at times this year. And I still think there's a chance that that's what they want to do. So I think they can still tag him as he's basically tagged still as like a fine handcuff. But I still think he's basically the best handcuff you can get on waivers that still could give you some flex appeal if you get in a pinch. The last guy I want to talk about today, Blake Corum. So week 2 always ends up being like, who are these younger players that end up really, who are the RB2s that we want to make sure are not on waivers because they are one injury away from being very relevant in fantasy. So he's the clear RB2. Oops. The clear RB2. The backup role, I mean, honestly, it's his to lose at this point. The analysts, the coaches are all saying that the depth behind Kyren is very unsettled at the moment. So I think that the Rams historically funneling touches and not as many running back targets, but the carries, the touchdowns, there's always going to be a decent amount of volume there around the goal line. Just look at Kyron's role right now. So I think that the spark that he gave them last week, so 5 touches for 44 yards and a touchdown, he's explosive. There's no doubt about it. It's the explosive nature of this. This is an offense that just put up 33 against Tennessee. The scoring environment is pretty high as well. So I think that if we start to see those type of comments come from McVay again, or a little bit more, I should say, that to me, the question is buzz versus reality. My pen doesn't want to cooperate today. Buzz versus reality. And I think if we continue to kind of hear this constant drumbeat from McVay, that he's someone that we should definitely be prioritizing on the waiver wire. Anytime your coach is giving you those endorsements, we get the week 1 spike performance in terms of his per touch metrics, all that. And I think that the offensive line is another one where it's not great. So if we end up seeing, I guess, a lack of success from this backfield in general, they might be looking for someone else to take over. So I think that just this team is basically, is this your last shot to stash him is the main question. And I think it might be, especially if this team continues to win games. These are the type of backup running backs handcuffs that don't stay on the waiver wire for long. That's it. Back with wide receivers to trade for tomorrow. So hit subscribe, drop a comment. I read every single one. See you then.